I stumbled upon a secret that shattered everything I thought I knew. My own family had been hiding my fiancé's affair with my best friend, but I'm not just going to sit back and accept it. I decided to flip the switch. What followed was absolute chaos. It all started when I went through my fiancé's phone. There it was, a group chat with names I trusted: Linda, Alex, Richard, Angie, and Maria. This chat wasn't new either. It had been active for a year. And in that very chat, John and Linda, yes, my best friend Linda, had confessed to my family about their affair. At first, my mom seemed horrified. She even shamed them. But then came the twist. Instead of standing by me, she asked John if he truly loved Linda because, as she put it, you can't help who you love. Great advice, Mom. Just what I needed. John's response? He loved both of us. I could feel my stomach turn. But that wasn't the worst of it. Lisa and Kim, my half-siblings, chimed in with their brilliant suggestion: why not just make the relationship open? Both Lisa and Kim are in open relationships and married. And apparently, it's working for them in whatever la-la land they live in. They fell down that train of humans aren't meant to be monogamous, and they ran with it. They both have poly partners. And that was discussed with their respective partners. So, on their end, nothing is wrong. At this point, John and I were already engaged. John mentioned to them that it seemed too far deep to try to bring it up. Angie, my mom, even though at this point I hate to even call her that, said that they would cover for John and Linda until he felt strong enough to bring up an open relationship with me. As I was reading, all I could think was how in the actual hell my family could betray me like that. How could Linda betray me like that? We've been friends since kindergarten. We even grew up with John. How could she process in her mind to sleep with my fiancé and say that she loves him too? All of this in this disgusting group chat. For John to have the nerve to say he loves me as well. For him to know firsthand what it's like to be betrayed like this. I honestly wanted to vomit. However, I was just taking screenshot after screenshot. Once I took the screenshots, I deleted them from his phone and just kept them on mine. The more I read down, I found out that Linda took my spot on our previous family trip. I got a really bad stomach bug a while ago that caused me not to go. I can't even begin to imagine what they did on the trip, and the fact my mother was okay with all of this, I think, is what hurts the most. The fact she's known for a whole year that my fiancé was cheating on me, that's taking the longest to sit in, I feel. There's more in the group chat, but these were the major points. It's been eating at me inside, and I want to explode and cuss them all out. I want to ruin their lives the way they ruined me. It all hurts so damn much, and I just really want to confront them. How do I even begin? What do I even say? The anger I feel is so intense that I feel like if I just let it all out, I would just look insane. But no, I wanted them to be as hurt and embarrassed as I am right now. So I decided to confront them and expose them when they were at their most vulnerable. John and I agreed on 3 rehearsal dinners. One for my family and friends, one for when his family and friends are in town, and the last one with our families combined. Our families and friend groups are big, and most people had conflicting schedules for the singular day we tried to plan. So, to please everyone, we just decided to separate them into groups and have dates that worked best for them for the rehearsals. I hated how my mother acted on this whole situation, not even taking my side, her own daughter, and willingly helping and accepting the garbage that my cheating fiancé and soon-to-be ex-friend are spewing. My relationship with my mother can be described as turmoil and stillness at best. After the emotional and mental abuse she put me through most of my childhood when I turned 18, she apologized. I thought she was actually sorry, and we were working towards rebuilding a bond. With all of this, I'm not even sure we had one to build in the first place. I am her affair baby, as I've been called. My mother is a very religious person, and she figured that if she confessed, then she would be saved and redeemed. The opposite happened, and she was kicked out of her church group. Anyone who lives in a small town knows gossip runs wild. Tony, my mom's husband, forgave her and decided to move to better help their image. I think that this incident may be why she hates me, yet I can't comprehend how this would be my fault, or why she would even hold on to that grudge for that long. This is where I exacted my revenge. I was constantly going back and forth between going ghost or full-on exploding on everyone. I decided to go on a mix of both routes. I sent the screenshots to John's parents and explained the whole deal to them. I was honestly expecting them to ignore it or not believe me. However, they called rather quickly. They asked me if Elle had any hard proof of them cheating besides their confession. I confided in them that they asked for more screenshots, and I just basically sent them a good chunk of the screenshots. His mother made me feel so awful for sending them. She was sobbing and apologizing for her son. She soon became inconsolable. His father took the phone and asked if there was anything his son could do to make it up to me. I was offended he asked that. Yet, I saw it from his perspective later. I asked him if I could be frank, and he agreed. I told him that unless his son could shrivel up and disappear, then there wasn't anything he could say. His father said that he understood. I asked him if they could keep this to themselves until I brought it up to John. They said they could, and we ended the call. For a while, I thought vomiting from stress was rare, but it finally happened. John heard me vomiting, but not the phone call. He woke up and tried to rub my back. I held my hand up and cleaned myself up. This is around 7 a.m. in the morning. John had concern in his voice and was asking if I was okay. For once, I saw nothing but red. Yet, I kept my composure. I have no idea why, but I guess that will be my superpower. I ignored him and went back to sleep. I woke up at 8 a.m. to prepare for the rehearsal dinner. John told me he had to finish some things before heading to the restaurant. I told him that was fine and that I'd see him later. Before he left, he said he loved me, and this was one of the days he was excited for. I said me too, trying not to have much rage behind it. Once he left, I gathered all the screenshots. For some people who don't know, you can schedule text messages to be sent out at a certain time. I decided to do this to send it to everyone. Linda's family, our friend groups, his family as well as mine. I sent it to go out at 1:25 p.m. This would be the halfway point of the dinner, and people would be dropping off gifts early for us and etc. I gathered the black hole of stress forming in me and headed to the restaurant when it was time. My mother and her husband were already there. My mother hugged me and all I could do was stand there. To feel her hands on me almost felt like she was personally violating my spirit. I did a quick tap hug so she wouldn't get suspicious and we headed inside. Guests started flowing in and everyone was surprisingly on time, besides my grandparents, but they moved slowly, so I didn't blame them. Once everyone was gathered, John went on a spiel about how he was happy everyone could come and that he was excited for his family for the next dinner, which was taking place on June 20th. He mentioned how I was the love of his life and how he was so happy our families would mingle. I wanted to ask him how dare he say that crap. But nothing but fake smiles and nods from me. Linda was basically looking like a clueless dog and smiling right along and clapping for us. To see this happen in real life is truly mind-boggling. The lengths people will go to have their cake and eat it too. I could barely eat as the stress was getting to me so badly. At the time I set for the messages, people's phones started buzzing and John's and Linda's phones were blowing up. I would like to admit that for once a genuine smile crept on my face. It was like watching an entire kingdom crumble and fall. The horrified faces of Linda and John when they looked at me were golden. It's the one highlight I will hold onto from this emotional day. My aunt went ballistic. She started calling my mom a cruel, heartless B-word over and over. My mother hurriedly checked her phone and saw I sent her the screenshots. She started screaming and becoming irate, saying I was really trying to ruin her life again. I was right. She still, apparently, is upset about being caught having an affair and being shunned. My grandparents' reaction hurt the most, because they started screaming at my mother. My grandmother was trying, with a few of our other guests, to hold my aunt back as she started screaming every explicative she could. My grandfather was screaming at my mother that he didn't raise a whore. At this point, everyone is screaming and crying in hysterics. My other bridesmaids were cussing Linda out and calling her a whore. I hate to admit it again, but I took joy in that. My grandfather went on to scream at John with some things I can't say here because he was very explicit. I just started laughing and sobbing. I had so many emotions that I genuinely think my body didn't know what to do, so it did everything. The tears just kept coming. My cousin escorted me outside as fast as she could with John chasing us down. He kept screaming my name and begging me to talk to explain. I ignored him and my cousin was pushing him away from her car. so she could get in and drive off. She took me to my aunt's house and told me to stay there and not answer the door for anyone. I kind of felt like a kid being left at home alone. All I did was just sit on the floor. That's when I just started bawling. All the emotions I've kept pent up for a whole week just finally came up. After about another hour, my aunt and cousin came back home. They hugged me for like a good 5 minutes. When we finally broke off, I noticed my aunt had a few scratches on her. I'm assuming they couldn't hold my aunt back from my mom for much longer. My aunt caught me up on everything. Apparently, after my cousin drove off with me, John came back in and started screaming at Linda for ruining everything. They got into a screaming match, and some of our friends were trying to split them apart. My grandparents, aunt, and Tony, my mom's husband, were drilling into my mother for answers. Tony was the most livid. Apparently, during the family trip I couldn't go to, my mom told Tony that I had offered my ticket to Linda so she could enjoy a nice break for herself. Tony, at this point, is screaming and reading some of her messages out loud. She was begging him to stop and that she could explain. My aunt started adding that she better start explaining because all she sees is a worthless mother and a vile person. Apparently, this set my mother off, and she started screaming about how she hated me, about how I ruined her life and made it difficult, how she felt like she could never be happy because I was always a constant reminder of her biggest mistake ever, and she regretted not aborting me when she had the chance. That set my aunt off, and she basically pounced on her. For context, my aunt is infertile. In her words, I was the daughter she never got to have. So in her mind, she went full mama bear mode on my birth giver. That's what I'm calling her now. My aunt has been more of a mother to me than my biological mother ever has in the past 22 years of my life. To summarize some of the details, Tony is divorcing my mom. He's had suspicions for a few months that she's been cheating again. Linda exposed John's text to her that he was sleeping with her because he felt I was growing distant a while back. I wasn't. Elle was putting in overtime at work to save up for his birthday, and he was lonely and didn't know how to bring it up to me. Linda's father spammed her with calls and will be cutting her off financially. Apparently, Linda believes this is my fault, and I'm an evil witch for ruining her according to her text. My mother has been on a tirade with our family exclaiming I'm an evil person for destroying her world again. She should have thought about that before condoning anything. My half-siblings felt it wasn't their place to say anything to me and that I should have expected John to look elsewhere because humans aren't monogamous and people love who they love. Same old, same old. A lot more has happened, but to avoid my brain from imploding on itself from the stress and anger, it's finally out in the air. I've been getting texts and calls from everyone, but at that moment, I've left my phone in the other room. My aunt offered for me to stay with her until I got out of this jumbled mess. I accepted it, seeing as I have no intention of going back to that apartment. I've already emailed my landlord and will handle it all next week. My boss emailed me back and said I was allowed to use some paid time off for as long as I needed. I will definitely take it seeing as I'm highly considering moving somewhere quiet. My aunt and cousin are at my place getting some of my things and my cat. John is there begging them not to take my things and to have me just talk to him. I don't know what he thinks a conversation will do. The emotional and mental scars I have is not going to go away for a while. I also know I have a long journey waiting for me in therapy. However, things have escalated heavily. The next day, I woke up and took a long, hot shower. I turned my phone back on. I couldn't even unlock it or clear a notification before I got a call from one of my bridesmaids. I answered, and she immediately started screaming at me about how I could ignore Linda and John in their time of need. At first, I was confused seeing as I don't give a damn about them anymore. I asked her not to yell at me, but she continued anyway. She screamed that Linda had self-harmed. When she sent me the images, they were very top surface level. Enough for the scar to appear, and a little blood. Regardless of whether or not it was deep enough, it still shook me. I wanted to scoff on the phone because at this point, I knew she was doing it to rally people on her side since I wouldn't respond to her text. Yet she also told me John tried to odd. His friends found him at my apartment all groggy. They took him to the hospital where he was cleared since they didn't have to pump. They are keeping him on watch for the next 72 hours, which is good. Just because I hate his guts doesn't mean I want him dead. After this, my friend group has been split very heavily since I didn't respond. to either of them before they did this. I still have no intention of talking to either of them. I don't really care what they do for attention, just as long as they leave me the hell alone. During the initial confrontation with my egg donor, which is what I'll be calling my biological mother from now on, Tony found out my egg donor lied to him and said Linda could take my ticket to go with them for the trip. They got home and started arguing more because Tony brought up the suspicions he had about my mother cheating. She started screaming at him and confessing everything. She told him my half-siblings aren't his, and a lot of other very hurtful things. He had to call the police on her to escort her off his property. Tony followed up with me this morning to tell me he is divorcing her. His lawyers are drafting up his papers within the next week or so. He told me that my mother confessed that I was the product of a long-term affair she had with his best friend. My egg donor is a very vile woman, I am coming to learn. Yet after finding out Tony is getting papers, she has tried to backpedal. She has been calling my aunt, begging her to convince Tony not to do this. She has been trying to call Tony and his family, but they all have been ignoring her. Yet this wasn't enough for my egg donor. She knew my aunt's schedule and tried to come over to assault me. My cousin was still with me, so she couldn't get in, but hearing her scream at me, some of my very low insecurities hurt, and I started to have a panic attack. My cousin took me upstairs. When we heard a loud crash, my mother broke through the window, ran upstairs, and attacked me. For once in my life, I hit my egg donor back. All the anger I had towards her, I finally let out. My cousin was struggling to separate us, so she had to run to get our neighbor. I only have a few scratches and bite marks, but outside of that, I am okay. I'm also placing charges against my egg donor. Hopefully, I can get a restraining order, honestly. My mom ran off before the police came, but I gave them Tony's address just in case she tried going back there. I see that those evil people aren't going to stop until they get a response out of me. However, on the weird side, I got a call from my half-sister. She tried apologizing, and I cut her off because I don't want to hear it anymore. She then scoffed and had the nerve to ask if I could watch my nieces while she, her husband, and her boyfriend all go on a trip. I love my nieces and nephews, but I told her that she could go F herself. If she wanted me to watch her nieces, then she would have to ask through my aunt. She started screaming about how I was being unfair to her and punishing her kids. I told her I was punishing her. She said, "Never mind," and that I couldn't see my nieces. I knew this was something that could happen, but it hurt my heart. I'm pretty sure she's telling them I hate them. I'm keeping the screenshots, and my aunt and cousin said they would back me up. If they reach out in the future, everything that happened is so much, but I'm expecting more to happen, honestly. One thing I know about egg donor is that she hates losing. I know she sees this as a loss, and she won't stop until she comes out on top. My half-brother has me blocked on everything, and I'm pretty sure he is siding with my half-sister. I'm feeling really overwhelmed emotionally, but I feel like I need to write this. On a positive note, I start therapy next week. Right now, my aunt and cousin are packing up John's things and dropping them off with his friend, Leo. Leo's been super supportive and on my side through all of this. This morning, he even dropped off my favorite fruit at my aunt's place and reassured me that I can talk to him anytime. I asked if he'd keep in touch with John, and he said no, he's just holding on to John's stuff until his parents pick it up. I really appreciate his help, but that's all for now.